everybody, and welcome back to IT Project Management. In this module, we're moving from the project scope management and the work breakdown structure to one of the most important aspects in project management, project schedule management. We will learn how to build a solid project schedule first from a waterfall perspective and then from an agile perspective. But before we do that, we need to consider one important aspect of specifically IT project management.
Imagine that you have a lot of work, but there is no one in your organization who can do it. What now? Do you hire people and add to your organization's payroll so that they can make your product? Or do you literally buy consultant work with subcontracts? Let's see. Before we can build a solid project schedule, we first have to talk about the impacts that make or buy decisions and project procurement management have on that activity. So by the end of this module, you will be able to evaluate schedule estimation impacts caused by make or buy decisions and labor outsourcing strategies. You will also be able to follow and apply the steps of a solid procurement management process and to manage a make or buy decision for some or all of your project scope. You will then be able to pick the optimal supplier for your subcontracting needs and determine when to outsource and when to offshore work. Lastly, you will be able to select the appropriate contract type for your supplier relationship. We already know that to be as successful as possible, your project is going to need to pay for a lot of things. Not just people and their work, although that's what we have focused on so far. Your project also needs products. Those include hardware, either as a deliverable, such as when you install a new computer lab with 50 Linux machines, or as a tool on which your developers complete their work. It also needs software licenses, printing services, sometimes even a separate building with security because you're developing something top secret. All of these non-labor items impact your schedule. They need to be ordered, delivered, and tested before you can use them. This means any tasks that use these items can only start after they have been received by the people doing the work. It's similar with services. And yes, we're back with people. If you choose to hire consultants, you'll need to remember, nobody steps into an organization and knows how to do everything the right way from the very beginning, not even former employees who are coming back as consultants. There's always that one process or those 2 new branches in GitHub that people new to the organization need to be trained on. So just like with buying products, buying people's work requires lead time. And that lead time needs to make it into your work breakdown structure as a separate line item, either as order lead time or as consultant training time. If you forget those, you might already set yourself up for issues from the get-go. The last thing that can impact your schedule in the most unpredictable ways is also the most comprehensive outsourcing solution you can buy. Results. Those are also often called turnkey solutions or full spectrum services, meaning that you enter into a contract with a company to execute part of your project as their business, complete with their own hiring, scheduling, and budget management, and all of their technical processes, including testing. Depending on contractual arrangements, you can function as the product owner who has significant insight into the development processes, or as the buyer who has close to no insight into or control over what your subcontractor is doing. If you are in the second situation I have just described, waiting for your weekly progress updates can be a nerve-wracking, nail-biting component to your job. No matter what though, once the subcontractor solution is delivered, it needs to be thoroughly integration tested to ensure that no parts of the delivery clobber anything in your production system. And it is this expanded integration testing of your subcontractor solution that needs to become part of your WBS with a realistic activity duration estimate. For this, always remember the 10% reserve to plan for extended bug fixes and retesting. Hiring subcontractors can be a great solution if you don't have the facilities nor the qualified personnel to build in your company the solution you need to make your project successful. This is where another project management knowledge area comes in, the project procurement knowledge area. Here's how this works. First, you and your team, including your business analysts and the project sponsor or product owner, will have to do the math. Use the methods that you have already learned before in this course, like payback period, net present value, and so on, to determine whether it's cheaper to produce the more complicated part of your project or whether it's cheaper to purchase a turnkey solution from a supplier. Once that make or buy decision has been made, the next step is to write up a statement of work, which identifies the scope of the work that you're looking to buy externally and the request for proposal, or RFP, which specifies the content and the structure of the offers that you want to receive from potential suppliers. You will have to publish these on your company's website or in industry forums in order to get potential suppliers to submit their offers in time. And yes, that deadline, together with your evaluation of these offers, need to become another line item on your project schedule. Once you have evaluated the, let's say, 12 offers that you have received and narrowed them down to about 3, you're ready to call a bidder conference with those 3 suppliers. At this bidder conference, suppliers get to ask you more specific questions about the solution you need them to build so that they can submit to you even more detailed proposals. Once you have received those proposals, it's source selection time. To select the best subcontractor for your advertised scope of work, you will want to look at not just the cost of their proposal, but you will want to understand how good their work is, and it never hurts to call their references. And you will want to look at the health of their company itself to decide if there's any risk in hiring them. I've seen this happen in my own professional life, that a subcontractor went bankrupt in the middle of their period of performance for a project I was on. They let all their staff go, and the work that they were contracted to do for us was never finished. My company, who was the buyer in that case, had to go through a number of legal steps to get at least the partial code from the insolvency mass, and that was a long and messy process. Needless to say that this delayed our project by a lot because we now had to hire people to finish what we thought we had purchased. To prevent problems like that, often a larger organization will already have done this kind of investigation for you so that you can pick your suppliers from a list of pre-screened vendors. Sometimes there are rules that require you to pick from specific vendors like veteran-owned, minority-owned, or woman-owned businesses. This is especially true for government work. And sometimes the list that you get contains product categories that only specific vendors can supply. If there is only one vendor in the entire country or world who knows how to build that specific piece of hardware or software that you need for your project, that is called sole source. If there are a number of vendors that could build that part, but your company has decided to use one particular one because they have a specific contractual history with them, that is called single source. And that, in a nutshell, is your project procurement process. Once you have completed your source selection step as part of the project procurement process, it's time to set up the subcontract with your supplier. How that contract is set up can significantly impact the schedule and the budget of your own project. So heads up, everybody, here's a crash course in what to look for when structuring a subcontract. Of course, you will always want to have a lawyer by your side. Basically, when negotiating how to structure a contract for your subcontractor, you will want to consider the risk to you as the buyer, and the subcontractor will consider the risk to them as a supplier. The risk to your project will be that the subcontractor delivers their work late or with insufficient testing or quality, or that they hold your product hostage, saying that more work than initially agreed upon needs to be done because you may have changed your mind, or they may have found out more details than anticipated at the point at which they signed the contract with you. So in other words, as the buyer, you will have to find ways to optimize the cost to you and the quality of the delivery. Your supplier is going to want to optimize the cost to their company and create a reserve for any problems they may run into while working for you. There are essentially two major contract types that accommodate each of these risk areas. Fixed price contracts are the least risky for the buyer, that is you, because you negotiate one price at the start of the contract, and that is what your supplier gets paid at the end. Now, even with a negotiated delivery date, which is usually called a period of performance, in place, suppliers may decide to miss that deadline if a better contract from a different buyer comes their way. That is why often an incentive fee, that is an extra bonus that the vendor can earn if they deliver on time, or with an extra round of testing, or following extra quality measures, is part of a fixed price contract. This incentive fee can be a percentage of the contracted price or an absolute sum. These strict guidelines can help you control your subcontractor's performance somewhat. Plus, you will know when this piece of work will be finished and how much it will cost as soon as you start planning your project schedule. But what if the element that you need to have built is less strictly defined by your statement of work and remains more experimental, like something nobody has ever built before? This is where your supplier may ask for a cost reimbursable contract. In a cost reimbursable contract, you and your supplier need to agree to a list of tasks, possibly even a separate work breakdown structure that you will pay for, and conversely, what you will not pay for because it's out of scope. Then the subcontractor is allowed to charge work time only against those tasks, which are then called allowable tasks, and send you a bill every week or biweekly or every month with a progress report. While a contract structure like this allows your vendor to do their best work and to do it at their pace, one of the ways you can control their performance period is again with an incentive fee that will be paid only upon timely delivery or great testing or whatever delivery criteria you specify in the contract. Those are the two big contract types here. Do you see now why it's a good idea to have a lawyer look this over? The last contract type is different than the two above. It is usually used for ongoing maintenance activities where there's no new scope to be built. Those activities could be ongoing tech support services, janitorial services for a new office building you need to rent for the project duration, that kind of thing. Those are the time and materials contracts. They are usually much more low-key than the former two contract types. Make sure you have a really good understanding of these contract types. As a project manager or product owner, it is your job to look out for the best interests of your project and to find a solution that helps both you as the buyer and your subcontractor as the supplier deliver measurable organizational value to the client of your project. Especially in the IT industry, outsourcing and what is now called the gig economy has long been a fact of life. This development started as early as the 1960s and is stronger now than ever, where constantly more than half of all IT and business process engineering work has been outsourced. If you look at the outsourcing industry revenue numbers between 2010 and 2019 here, you'll see that the volume of around $66.5 billion for IT work has been pretty steady, as have the $26 billion for business process outsourcing. And what you're basically looking at here is the revenue of your industry, the IT services industry. For larger projects, and we're talking about something like IT systems for a number of airports in the country or for a hotel chain, a sourcing strategy makes sense. And since, as we have already seen, full insourcing is a very rare phenomenon, selective outsourcing or full outsourcing of IT services and often also business processes is closer to reality. In many cases, outsourcing often reaches across international borders into countries where the hourly rates for technical talent are comparatively less, which means that a project with a tight budget can often get more scope done. That is called offshoring. Before offshoring project work, a lot of questions need to be asked, including whether the savings in terms of labor cost justifies the unavailability of this work for the domestic labor market. Although outsourcing and offshoring sound great at first, hey, who wouldn't want to get more work done while spending fewer dollars per man hour? It can very quickly go wrong. In an attempt to squeeze the last penny out of a project budget, some IT managers and project managers try to outsource any task possible, which may be the wrong thing to do. When, for example, important design decisions are being made while the product is already in the build phase. Outsourcing only loosely defined scope as part of a contract that does not go into enough detail can often lead to a loss of control over the activity, especially if the vendor decides to stonewall until the outsourced activity is done. And if it's not clearly defined, done can mean something different to the vendor than it does to you, the buyer. This is where quite often redesign and rework become necessary, leading to schedule problems and obviously budget issues as well. And if the contract is poorly written, no exit strategy exists that would allow the buyer to say thanks, but no thanks, and walk away from the contract. Consider this case study, again about Husky Air's Pilot Angel's scheduling system. It looks like, due to financial problems, Husky Air needs to revise the contract with HIT Pros and cut the budget for application testing. The customer insists, however, that the project schedule must stay on time. So now we're left with little to no budget for application testing, but the pressure to deliver a working, well-tested system is still on. This means the project manager will have to make some quick, hard decisions. Insourcing, outsourcing, or offshoring? What should HIT Pros build themselves? And what tasks from the WBS should be outsourced and with which contract type? Lastly, how will this change impact the project schedule? Pause this video here and think about all of these questions. Honestly, in the real world, nothing ever goes off without any problems. What you're seeing here is a slice of real life. At this point, you have learned the most important parts of planning and conducting procurements, which are part of the procurement management knowledge.
All right, let's summarize. In this module, you have learned how to follow and apply the steps of a solid procurement management process. This involves managing a make or buy decision for some or for all of your project scope, picking the optimal supplier for your subcontracting needs, and determining when to outsource and when to offshore your work. The most important part of subcontracting, however, is being able to select the appropriate contract type for your supplier relationship, because a lot of risk depends on exactly that. Lastly, we have looked at how to evaluate schedule estimation impacts that are caused by these make or buy decisions and by labor outsourcing strategies. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.